Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share an upgrade tutorial for the Asus Zephyrus G15. For those of you that have been following my coverage of this laptop, you already know that I think it's one of the best available here in 2021, and apparently the public agrees because it is still permanently sold out. This is the 3070 model from Best Buy with, of course, its 15.6-inch 165 Hz QHD IPS display, an AMD Ryzen 9 5900HS 8-core CPU that is brand spanking new, and as I already mentioned, the NVIDIA RTX 3070, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 1 terabyte Hynix NVMe SSD. Now, the Hynix drive is fast, and I think the majority of you out there will just want to add a secondary drive for additional storage, for games and video and photo editing. However, if you want to get even more out of the machine, like myself, then this may be the route for you to go. Now, I will be including links to everything you see here in the description, so that'll make it easy for you to pick up if you want to follow my upgrade path. Essentially, what I'll be using, you see, both are Sabrent drives. I've got the Rocket 4 Plus, that is a Gen 4 drive, 2 terabyte, in my right hand. That will be what I will be cloning the original Hynix drive to, and then the Sabrent Rocket Q 4 terabyte drive will be my secondary drive for all other content. Now, even though this is a Gen 4 drive, which makes it pretty much one of the fastest on Earth, this laptop does not support Gen 4, but I look at this as future-proofing, and this still will give you some of the best read-write performance on Earth that Gen 3 at least can afford you. These are both expensive, but I would argue worth it. I've also got an iFixit little repair kit. You're going to need that. I also have Sabrent's offline cloning device. Now, I have already cloned the Hynix to the Sabrent 2 terabyte. This way you don't have to sit through the 15-minute cloning process, but it is as plug and play as it gets. You literally just pop in the 2 drives, and once you make sure that you have your source, in this case it would be the Hynix, in A, and then your target in B, you literally close it up, connect the power cable, if you close it up correctly, connect the power cable, hit the power button. It does need to be hardwired. Do not have the USB Type-C cable connected. Please do not do that. And then essentially just hold down the clone button for 3 seconds and the process begins. Now, I have about 600 gigs of the 1 terabyte Hynix already in use here, and the clone process took 15 minutes. And that's why I say the majority of users are probably going to be happy with the Hynix as their primary drive, and then they'll probably just want to supplement with another single terabyte, 2 terabyte, or 4 terabyte drive, depending on budget and, of course, your needs. I've also got a Sabrent, very inexpensive enclosure for that Hynix drive once it comes out, just so I can drop it into something that is, you know, again, effective, affordable, and of course not Thunderbolt 3. I do have Thunderbolt 3 enclosures as well, but this laptop doesn't support them, so no interest there. And then I've got the iFixit kit, because you're going to need that in order to do all of this work. So let's get started. Essentially, as I've mentioned, I've already opened this thing up, and there are some things you want to know. First and foremost, we have different size screws along this machine. All of these right here are shorter than these, and that's important because you want them to go back where they belong. We also have 3 hidden screws. These are also shorter screws. Just keep that in mind. Also, the right-hand corner, which is really the left bottom side of the laptop, this screw you should not attempt to remove. Essentially, it is threaded and has like a nut on the other side. You're going to want to unscrew it, but not try to remove it. Trust me, do not bother. Also, be very careful when tightening these back up. I'll get to that when I close everything up, simply because you actually can damage the laptop, even with the correct screws returning to their home. I actually have a dimple now on the other side of the deck, simply because of tightening it up, not because of anything else. So that's because this is a predominantly plastic build. I'm not happy about it, and that's why I'm giving you the warning now. So first things first, let's grab our screwdriver. I'm going with a Phillips number 1. And again, I recommend the iFixit kit. It's inexpensive. easy, has pretty much everything you're going to need. So we'll start off with that screw that I was just mentioning that you're not going to really try to get rid of. You're just going to loosen. You're going to need the pry tool, and in my case, I'll be using the tweezers as well. Another thing to be aware of is that there is a thermal pad on the NVMe drive in here. Now, I don't think it plays very well with the 2 terabyte drive that I'm installing, simply because the Hynix is incredibly thin and there just isn't a lot of room on the board, which you'll see in a moment, for the Sabrent 2 terabyte drive, which is fairly large compared to the Hynix. In addition to that, I'm not upgrading the RAM today, for those of you that are curious, simply because, at least for my uses so far, I've been able to get by with the 16 gigs. And remember, 8 of the 16 gigs is soldered to the board, which means if you purchase a 32 gig DIMM to upgrade this to 40 gigs, which if you're doing a lot of video editing like myself, it isn't a bad idea, you will lose dual channel support, unfortunately. So there is a trade-off on that upgrade, which doesn't make me very happy, and it shouldn't make you happy either. But that's part of the rub with this machine. It's just the way it is. If you want 32 gigs in dual channel, you have to step up to the 3080 model and essentially buy the farm, which I don't recommend either. So I may end up upgrading the RAM down the road, but for now I'm living with the 16 gigs, and I feel like upgrading the NVMe's should be more than enough to at least give me the performance edge, as well as compensate for the fact that there is no Thunderbolt on this machine. And again, if you watched my upgrade tutorial for the Aero 15 XC, this is similar, but a little bit different in that Asus does things, well, differently. For example, the different length screws is a bit of a pain in the butt. And then you have these little rubber covers, which kind of act the same way as Gigabyte's little stickers to inform Asus as to whether or not you've actually gone inside the machine. So I'm just going to remove these, pop them right in here. They have a little bit of adhesive. If you use these tweezers, you should be able to get them and retain the adhesive, but you don't really need them. Obviously, once you've done this, it's really a matter of personal preference. Just remember what I said about tightening the screws, because even done correctly, you can run into a problem. Next, we're going to pop out the pry tool here, and it's already lifted here in this right corner, and that's, as I stated, because that screw is meant to be a guide. So we're just going to run along the bottom hinge, and that pretty much should take you home. I mean, you can run along more of the machine, but that should do it to essentially get the entire bottom plate off of the machine. That is, if I have actually unscrewed everything, which it's possible I haven't, because it's not, yeah, looks like I forgot something here. Well, it's coming out with me, I'll make sure. Yep, I didn't get rid of these, so don't forget the little ones. And again, remember, all of the longer screws are for this section and the sides. The shorter ones are for the center and the bottom. I'm going to reiterate that over and over again, because that was the one surprise that I think a lot of you are going to run into. All right, now that we've gotten everything loosened up, off goes the back plate, and we reveal the internals. So you can see we've got the CPU, the GPU, the Hynix NVMe, the second NVMe slot. We have our RAM right there that is upgradable. It is a Samsung DIMM, for those of you that are wondering. So if you want to match it directly, I'm going to give you a nice close-up right now so you can actually see it up close and personal. Flip that around, give you a shot. And I have to say, Asus did a very nice job with everything here in terms of the build. Just not in love with, the fact that I've got a dimple now from the screw going in right here. So again, be very careful when tightening those screws. Do not go too far. You will regret it. I already do. And that's why you're getting a word of warning. Now, you can see on the Hynix, we've got a thermal pad there. By the way, your Wi-Fi 6 chipset right there. The thermal pad is coming off. Do you need this? Well, I just ripped a piece off. Yes and no. I mean, I don't think that you really have to have it. It doesn't hurt, but in a, perfect setting, ideal world, it's good to have it. But if the NVMe, like in my case, is going to have a tough time fitting, then you may want to avoid it. Now, just got a little extra piece of, ripped off a piece there. I'm going to get rid of it anyway. Let's go ahead and get our screwdriver. Let's take out the Hynix, and as I mentioned, I already cloned this, so you will not need to sit through even a fast-forwarded version of that. Now, because the Hynix is 1 terabyte, please make sure when using this cloning device that whatever you're cloning to, even if you're just trying to get a faster 1 terabyte drive, which you're really not going to find, so I don't recommend really trying to hunt for that. You should really only be doing this for capacity purposes. Keep in mind that the target drive must be larger than the source. So even if you got another 1 terabyte drive, for example, a Samsung 980, it will physically be less. So be very careful. Make sure that you verify that the drive is of equal or greater size. Otherwise, the cloning device will not work. Also, I've gotten messages from many of you. Make sure that you have the DC power to the cloning device. Otherwise, it will not work. Also, make sure you do not have anything hooked up to the USB terminal. Now, the thermal paste on the reverse side of the Hynix is incredibly thick, and that is something that I find we've got to remove because I just can't make it. Unfortunately, it just cannot fit, get that right side up for you, on the Sabrent. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that as well. And I'll see what I can make fit here, but I'm not going to go crazy because realistically, you do not need these thermal pads. It's one thing if you're on like a traditional desktop motherboard, put that over there because that's where it's going to end up. Also, I should have stated at the top, please make sure you're grounded before you start working on this. You do not want to bring static electricity into the build and ruin your laptop. You will not be happy. So, first things first, as I just stated, the thermal pad is not going to make it underneath this drive. I already know that. So, I'm going to put this on, but just remember that because from my experience thus far, trying to use it simply meant flex, and you do not want this drive flexing at all. In fact, you want no NVMe drive to flex. That is a major no-no. You know, this has been a problem as storage sizes have gotten greater. Essentially, a lot of people are, have seen constraints with sizing and getting things seated correctly. So right now, there's a little bit of flex here. Not in love with seeing that, but it should be fine. And I am going to put the thermal pad back on the top. I don't think we're going to miss the other one too much. And even though I broke off a piece of this, I'm also not too concerned about that. And again, heat sinks are really necessary when you're dealing with desktop computers. The thermal pad is just good at mitigating heat. It's not going to really keep things cool, and you really shouldn't see thermal throttling with drives like this. Now, the 4 terabyte. And I have to say, if I could only go with one drive and I didn't have the luxury of having the Rocket 4 Plus, the Rocket Q 4 terabyte really would be a first option for me because, at least in terms of Gen 3 performance, it is incredibly fast and, of course, leaves nothing to be desired when it comes to actual storage capacity. So it's a win-win in both of those departments. Again, be careful when unscrewing even, these NVMe screws, the mounting screws, because the board does flex a little bit, and that is a little bit scary. You do not want to break your brand new laptop, or any laptop for that matter. So let's go ahead and just get that in. Very simple. It's just a matter of lining up the pin assembly, and then go ahead and press down, line up your screw, and you should be in business. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, just like everything else out there. Make sure that that's seated properly. It looks good. Both of these do. Frankly, I wouldn't mind taking this and repurposing it on top of here, but it's a little bit risky considering this is such a thick thermal pad. I mean, I would say it's not twice the thickness, but it's close. So while I would like to say I could throw this on here, I mean, I could try it and see what happens. They don't include anything for a secondary drive, so it wouldn't hurt. So let's just do that. How about that? And we'll see if it plays nice when I boot up. Now, because this is a 2 terabyte drive that I cloned from the 1 terabyte, there are going to be gaps, partition gaps, that I will have to go into the command prompt and essentially remove manually. I'm not going to do a video on that today. There are already videos like that on the internet, and if that's what you're looking for, trust me, you can find it. Now, hopefully this fits well. I have not tried putting this thermal pad here, but I'm hoping that it works out. So next step, close it up because we're not upgrading the RAM, as I mentioned. If, like I said, down the road, I change my mind, I will revisit it then. So go ahead and snap that into place. I did leave all of the screws in place to make life easy. So the corner right screw that I told you has that nut right there on it. I'm trying to do this without losing any screws so you can see it. You should see it right there. That is the only one that has it. And again, do not waste your time trying to unscrew it. I did, and you know, it's a waste of time, and it's intentionally designed to be a guide basically and make prying open the assembly easier. So once you have it in place, go ahead and start popping things in. Some screws may jump out as you do this. There's nothing wrong with that, totally natural. And again, remember, the longer screws must remain in these locations. Shorter screws, shorter screws. You don't want to make that error. I said I would keep reiterating it, and here I am continuing to reiterate it. So it looks like we got everything in place. Let's go ahead and close this up. And remember what I said about tightening. You know, you don't want to leave it so that screws can fall out, but do not tighten it to as far as it can go, because you will run the risk of a problem. So basically, once it starts to get tight, I would cease. Do not go beyond, because you could end up with a dimple like me. And this is the culprit right here. So this may actually have a problem in general with all machines. I mean, I Googled to see if I'm the only person that had this issue. I doubt that I am, but maybe I'm the only one willing to admit it. That's also possible. All right, so this is tightened up. This is the one screw that got away. And, you know, basically performance, once you have these in, it's not that you're going to see any true benefit in benchmarking. I mean, yes, the drives will be a little bit faster, but as I stated earlier, for me, this is the compensation for not having Thunderbolt, because this way I now have 6 terabytes of incredibly fast storage, and I'm not wondering or wishing that I had a Thunderbolt capable machine like the Aero 15 XC, which, you know, I thought was going to be my next laptop without any hesitation, until I started running into quirks that frankly shouldn't exist. And this machine, while it has its own quirks as well, I just think is a little bit more well balanced, even though anyone who follows my channel knows that I kind of swore off IPS panels a long time ago, and OLED is the way I go. My Ultrabooks, my televisions for years now. So it's hard to get me to buy in to an IPS panel, but I have to say that what Asus has done here is really a great blend of form and function, and at the right price. But, you know, corners were cut. The soldered RAM is a pain in the ass. The plastic build, yes, it's lighter, but it's also easier to, unfortunately, cosmetically blemish, as I've already learned. You know, with the Aero, no such thing with that aluminum chassis. And there is a little bit of aluminum here, but unfortunately not enough to save me. So now you're going to want to pop those little adhesives back on, which are pretty easy. They are tiny. I don't have Martian fingers, but, you know, if you just get them in the general vicinity, they should just pop in for the most part. It is, you know, little puzzle piece work, but no biggie. And as long as you retain the adhesiveness, which I have so far, they should stay on. And again, this is likely going to serve just for Asus's way of knowing whether or not you've ever opened up the machine. All right, now that we're done with that, it's time to boot it up. And again, the only thing you've missed in this process is the cloning, which, I mean, if people really want to see that, I can do a dedicated video, because I do have it recorded. It's just not that entertaining, folks. And really, it is that simple to do. So let's move our tools aside, and let's just make sure this baby boots. And now we should have a machine that has, of course, 6 terabytes of storage capacity, a major jump from the 1 terabyte. And before I do that, I'm going to show you that dimple right now. You can see it right there. And yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I am going to be installing a skin, but it doesn't make me happy, obviously, to have something like that on a nearly $2,000 laptop. So I'm just looking for a sign that it boots, and we should be in business. So let's just see, and we're good. I'm not even going to check because I know, I mean, I can take it off screen for a second because I know that we are going to be fine here. I'm at the desktop, and we're in business. So that is pretty much it. Oh, actually, you probably want to see the actual drive, so let me just get you there, closing out some crap from startup that you do not need to see. You know, game-related login information that I'm not willing to share yet with the public, maybe one day. But let's jump into Device Manager just so you can, not Device Manager, excuse me, Disk Management, so you can see those 2 drives that are now, they should be there, and of course they are. So right there you can see drive D, of course, is the 4 terabyte Q, and then disk 1 is the 2 terabyte. Now this is exactly what I was talking about. You can see 909 gigs is not allocated. So essentially those partitions that are in between the OS, the C partition, and the unallocated, I'm going to remove manually through command prompt. Again, it's a pretty simple process, takes about 5 minutes, and then essentially I can bridge those 2 partitions. And that's the end of the story. And then I'm rocking, as intended, 6 terabytes of some of the fastest storage on Earth. And then if down the road I decide I want to take this up to 40 gigs because realistically, you know, a lot of people ask me, why would you need 40 gigs? Well, if this supported dual channel through and through, 32 would be the sweet spot, and that's ideal for 4K video editing and really heavy photo editing, although 16 gigs should get you through most photo editing. It really depends on how large the files are that you're dealing with. So that's where I would like to really have 32 gigs of dual channel RAM, but I was not willing to spend the $2,500 dollar price point for the 3080 model, which really doesn't have much more performance than this. Same processor, and the 3080, because of power delivery constraints and really just not getting as much power as it could, since these are the basically the Max Q design, 80 to 100 max, it's not worth it. Now, if I find that the 16 isn't cutting it, then I may be willing to give up the dual channel and just, you know, for a little under $200, throw in a 32 gig DIMM and call it a day. But for now, I think the 6 terabytes of storage solves my Thunderbolt problem. Of course, I still have external drives that I can use with this, and the throughput on the Type-C ports is great. Also, I should have reiterated, when you do this, just go around your machine and make sure everything is fine in terms of that everything snapped into place. Even though you may have gotten every screw in, you want to make sure. And it seems like the thermal pad I threw in is perfectly fine too. So that one that I repurposed. So we'll see how it performs, how it behaves. Again, that's just to really control. It's not going to cool it at all in the way a heatsink would, but it will at least control the thermals a little bit. It'll spread the heat is what it will do. So I recommend it if you can do it. If not, you really don't have to worry, even if you don't have those pads on there, but obviously preferable to have them. But that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Again, highly recommend the laptop, highly recommend these 2 drives. Can't go wrong with them. I've been using them now for a while, and that's why I knew they were going to find their new home in whatever laptop I was going to be rocking. And then last but not least, this is where I'll end things. Again, I stated, because this doesn't have Thunderbolt, this is a really inexpensive enclosure, and basically I could keep this as a backup drive, right? Easily, I can do that. Or realistically just turn it into a 1 terabyte external. And with the throughput that you get out of the Type-C ports on this, the 3.2, you're looking at anywhere from 750 megabytes a second up to a terabyte. a gigabyte, I mean, excuse me. Wouldn't that be nice if we could get a terabyte? So that's not that far off from Thunderbolt 3. That's another thing that influenced my decision-making process, is that these latest gen, Type-C 3.2 ports do deliver almost Thunderbolt-like performance. So even with a sub $30 enclosure like this that is tool-free and I think has a nice design, it even happens to match this laptop, you're going to get fantastic throughput, and the Hynix drive, again, is top-notch. Even if you were buying it on its own, they make some of the fastest drives out there. So, of course, Sabrent does take the cake a little bit. But again, links to all of this in the description. Hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.